Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. Coming up in the next hour, India is all set for the world's largest election on Friday, polling to be held in 7 phases over 6 weeks. Israel's Prime Minister says that the country will defend itself as the West urges restraint. Jordan says an Israeli response to attack by Iran would risk a wider regional war. G7 finance ministers pledge cooperation on Iran sanctions. European Union to impose new sanctions on Tehran. And in the UEFA Champions League, Real Madrid eliminates Manchester City in a penalty shootout to reach the semi-finals. German heavyweights Bayern Munich knock out English club Arsenal. Amid calls for de-escalation, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel has said that Israel will make its own decisions on a response to the attack on it by Iran. He said that Israel will do everything necessary to defend itself. On Saturday, Iran launched a volley of drones and missiles at Israel in a first-ever attack from Iran on Israel's soil. The Israeli Prime Minister made the remarks as he met the foreign ministers of the UK and Germany.
I am coming now from meetings with the foreign ministers of Great Britain and Germany. Last night I spoke to British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and soon I will also speak to other leaders. I thank our friends for their support in the defense of Israel, and I say this both support in words and support in actions. They also have all kinds of suggestions and advice. I appreciate it. But I also want to make it clear. We will make our own decisions, and the state of Israel will do everything necessary to defend itself.
And joining me from Tel Aviv is my colleague Sarah Coates. Sarah, a US news website has reported that Israel's army chief, defense minister, and a war cabinet minister are all in favor of responding to the attack by Iran, but the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has not made up his mind yet. Now, is it a case of damned if you do, damned if you don't for Netanyahu, domestically and internationally?
Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, he is under a lot of pressure. This will be an extremely delicate balancing act for Netanyahu, as he on one hand really tries to appease these allies that have shown a lot of support over the last few days, keep them happy, and also continue this rare show of international support, while on the other hand he's facing a lot of pressure from here in Israel domestically, especially from the far right-wing elements of his coalition. These are people that also do sit on the Israeli Security Cabinet. We're talking here the lines of the far-right finance minister Bezalel Smotrich. He's just come out to say that there needs to be a disproportionate response to these strikes, these missile and drone attacks by Iran, saying that it must rock Tehran. But certainly, as I said, he is under a lot of pressure. We are hearing in Israeli media that the War Cabinet has now approved a number of measures. I think it's pretty safe to say that there will be a response, but it is when this happens and how it looks that we'll need to take note of.
Sarah, even as the focus remains very much on Israel and Iran, what's the situation like in Gaza? What are you learning about, one, delivery of aid, and two, Israel's planned military operation in Rafah?
Well, certainly we are hearing now through Egyptian sources that the United States has agreed to Israel's plan for this incursion into that southernmost city of Rafah if there is somewhat of a curtailed Israeli response to this Iranian attack. This, though, will take time. We do need to remember that there are some 1.3 million internally displaced Palestinians sheltering down in that area, an area that was declared a safe zone. It's going to take quite a lot of time to get these people out safely. And of course, this is something that the international community is just so very worried about. Now, the IDF did come out a little earlier this week to say that it has begun to purchase tents to move these displaced Palestinians to other areas of the Gaza Strip. We do understand that this would potentially happen in phases. They would be moved to these so-called humanitarian islands in the centre of the Strip. But certainly when it comes, Ramesh, to the humanitarian situation on the ground, Israel is seen by the international community as not doing enough. We heard from the EU's foreign policy chief, Borrell, just yesterday, slamming Israel, saying that despite these promises for Israel to open the Ashdod port and also the Erez crossing to let more aid in, that it still hasn't done this. Now, according to other aid groups, some 1.1 million Palestinians are on the brink of famine. This includes around 200,000 people in the north, and it was only just yesterday that these US Navy ships, they arrived in Greece, in Crete. They will now be bound for Gaza to begin this work on this so-called floating pier to try and get more aid in. But certainly the situation is dire, and it's really lost a lot of focus over this last week in the wake of these Iranian strikes.
Sarah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And staying in the region, after meeting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem, Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said that West Asia must not be allowed to slide into a situation whose outcome is completely unpredictable. Baerbock was visiting Israel for the 7th time since Hamas's attack on 7th October last year for de-escalation of tensions in the region.
The region must not step by step slide into a situation with a totally unpredictable outcome. Everyone must now act prudently and responsibly. I'm not talking about giving in. I'm talking about a wise restraint, which is nothing less than strength, because Israel, with its defensive victory, already showed strength last weekend.
Denn Stärke hat Israel mit seinem Defensivsieg am Wochenende schon gezeigt.
For his part, the UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron has highlighted a united front for Israel after Iran launched a barrage of drones and missiles on Israel last weekend. Cameron said that he was in Israel to show solidarity with the country.
The situation is very concerning. It's right to show solidarity with Israel. It's right to have made our views clear about what should happen next, but it's clear the Israelis are making a decision to act. We hope they do so in a way that does as little to escalate this as possible, and in a way that, as I said yesterday, is smart as well as tough. But the real need is to refocus back on Hamas, back on the hostages, back on getting the aid in, back on getting a pause in the conflict in Gaza. It's right to be here in Israel today to show solidarity after that appalling attack by Iran.
G7 foreign ministers will be discussing sanctions on Iran as they meet in Italy's Capri for a key meeting. The continued tensions in West Asia are dominating the talks between delegates from the US, the UK, France, Italy, Germany, Canada and Japan. The sanctions are expected to target the Iranian drone and missile programs. G7 host Italy also pushed for a de-escalation of West Asia tensions. Meanwhile, the European Union has decided to impose more sanctions on Iran for attacking Israel with missiles and drones on the 14th of April. Like the G7 sanctions, the EU measures will target Iran's unmanned aerial vehicles and missile programs. Earlier, the bloc took steps to prohibit the export of critical components used for the manufacture of drones. EU leaders have urged all sides to refrain from any action that may increase the tensions in West Asia.
We condemn this attack launched by Iran against Israel, we have decided to put in place sanctions against Iran. This is a clear signal that we want to send. And we also want to do everything to protect the civilians. Each civilian life matters. We call on the release without any conditions of all hostages. We call on a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire.
And joining me from Capri in Italy is my colleague Giles Gibson. Giles, what more can you tell us about the G7 foreign ministers meeting? Any official word yet on the nature and scope of these new Iran sanctions?
Well, the rain is actually coming down here on the island of Capri. I think not really the weather that the Italian hosts imagined they would have when they invited G7 foreign ministers to this meeting months and months ago. As you say, there is this real momentum, though, despite the slightly soggy weather, to move forward with some very tough sanctions against Iran. I think what's important to understand here is that the G7 itself is not going to be placing sanctions on Iran. This is always coordinated action, so the G7 nations agreeing to coordinate together on placing sanctions on their target, in this respect on Iran. And we are seeing that action already moving through. Just the fact that G7 finance ministers who've been meeting on the sidelines of the spring meetings which are taking place in Washington, D.C., they've agreed to ensure close coordination on future measures by Iran to acquire, produce or transfer weapons, so targeting the way that Iran is acquiring weapons to cause, as the G7 see it, instability within the Middle East. And we're also seeing at the European Council summit in Brussels, European nations also agreeing to move forward with some sanctions. So I think what we're going to see over the next few days or so is the G7 foreign ministers really working out how they can coordinate in a better way to respond to Iran for those missile and drone attacks that took place on Israeli territory just over the course of the weekend.
Giles, European foreign ministers, including Cameron and Baerbock, are returning from Israel convinced that Israel will respond to the attack on it by Iran. What does Europe really fear and why?
Well, that's what we've been hearing from the European ministers, as well as from Josep Borrell, who is the top diplomat from the European Union, the High Representative for Foreign Affairs. He spoke to journalists on his way into the talks that took place this morning, saying, local time here in Capri, saying that Capri is a very nice place, but unfortunately the world is not like this. And he did touch on the need to de-escalate tensions between Iran and Israel, and also urging Israel not to respond in a way to those strikes that we saw over the weekend that would just escalate tensions even further. But we also saw Josep Borrell, and I think we heard the same thing from David Cameron in that clip that you played just a few minutes ago, that the European Union is also concerned that these tensions between Iran and Israel could take the focus away from their push for there to be a ceasefire in Gaza, as well as more humanitarian aid getting into that area where there are just so many people desperately needing of basic supplies such as food and water and medicine.
All right, we leave it at that. Giles, thank you. Giles Gibson there reporting from Capri in Italy. In other news, Belgium has condemned Iran's attack on Israel and supported new sanctions against Iran.
Clearly condemn these attacks. Unacceptable what has happened. We're also looking into sanctions. My position is that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard should be put on a sanction list, and I would be interested to see what the position is of other countries on that topic.
And Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz has said that it was important that Israel does not respond with a massive attack of its own.
One thing is very clear, we have already taken many steps to sanction Iran. It will have to be discussed again and again what further steps are possible. It is also clear that these are processes that need to be closely monitored. There is already a list of sanctions imposed by these powers, and it is now a question of whether we can take a further step, a three-pronged approach, so to speak, although this is tied to legal procedures that the Commission's legal service is now dealing with.
Jordan has also expressed its concern over developments in the region. Jordan's Foreign Minister Ayman al-Safadi warned that an Israeli retaliation to Iranian strikes could bring a real risk of dragging the whole region into a devastating conflict. Safadi said that his country was lobbying major powers against an escalation that would have far-reaching consequences for regional stability and security. A staunch U.S. ally, Jordan, with the help of U.S. air defenses and support from the U.K. and France, shot down most of the Iranian drones and missiles that were flying over the country towards Jerusalem and a wide range of targets in Israel. Meanwhile, Israel-Lebanon border experienced tensions on Wednesday after Hezbollah launched missiles and drones at northern Israel, wounding 14 Israeli soldiers. Plumes of smoke drifted around the border. While in an counterattack, Israeli fighter jets struck Hezbollah infrastructure north of Baalbek in eastern Lebanon amid concerns that increased exchanges of fire between Israel and the Hezbollah could fuel further escalation. And still to come on DD India News Hour. The US reiterates its support for a permanent UN Security Council seat for India. US President Joe Biden calls for higher tariffs on Chinese steel and aluminium. And Croatia's ruling party wins Wednesday's parliamentary election, but with fewer seats than before and without a majority.
Will the Israel-Iran conflict blow up into a full-blown war in West Asia or the Middle East? Who killed the world's largest anaconda barely days after it was first discovered? Watch Connecting the Dots every Friday at 8 p.m. IST or 14:30 GMT on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. A quick recap of the headlines. Right, we'll get you some more for the moment now. The United States has reiterated its support for reforms in the United Nations, including the United Nations Security Council, in reference to India's permanent seat at the UNSC. At a press briefing, U.S. State Department's principal deputy spokesperson Vedant Patel addressed the question of India not having a seat in the UNSC. This comes months after Tesla CEO Elon Musk called the exclusion of India absurd.
The president has spoken about this before in his remarks to the UN General Assembly. The Secretary has alluded to this as well. We certainly support reforms to the UN institution, including the Security Council, to make it reflective of the 21st century world that we live in. I don't have any specifics to offer on what those steps are, but certainly we recognize that there is a need for reform.
The U.S. House of Representatives will vote on aid packages for Ukraine, Israel and the Indo-Pacific by Saturday, despite opposition from Republican Party's right wing. The aid package, worth more than $95 billion, includes $60.84 billion for addressing the conflict in Ukraine, $23.2 billion allocated for replenishing U.S. weapons and facilities. The bill also proposes $26.38 billion for Israel and designates $9.1 billion of humanitarian aid while excluding funding for the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency, UNRWA. The Speaker of the U.S. House's job is under threat, with hard-right Republicans who say that they will move to oust Mike Johnson if he goes ahead with plans to put a foreign policy bill to vote. Johnson has said that he will not resign, saying that the move to push him out are absurd. DD India's Caroline Malone reports from Washington, D.C.
House Speaker Mike Johnson has a plan to get foreign aid passed in the lower chamber. He's put forward 5 bills on Ukraine, Israel, for Indo-Pacific allies, another from the Republican Party's desired foreign policy priorities, and the last on boosting security at the southern US border. That's already been highly controversial and part of the reason that they've been unable to pass foreign aid packages so far, despite President Joe Biden asking for it months ago. The issue has become so controversial, in fact, that Johnson's job is under threat. Members of the far-right Freedom House caucus say that he is surrendering the border and that it shows that he and allies care more about funding Ukraine than they do about securing their own borders. Well, voting on it could happen this week, at which point Johnson, like his predecessor Kevin McCarthy, is at risk of being voted out. Some representatives say that despite talks, it's become clear that a motion to vacate him will be brought if the Speaker plans proceed. Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massey, 2 Republicans, are supporting a motion to remove Johnson from the speakership, and that could happen within 2 days of them bringing it to the floor. Caroline Malone in Washington for DD India.
Lauding the partnership with India, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has said that the deal between the two nations to produce jet weapons in collaboration is revolutionary, underscoring that India and the U.S. are also co-producing an armored vehicle. Austin said that such joint ventures will enhance the capabilities. Austin's remarks came as he testified before a panel of lawmakers on the 2025 budget on Wednesday. The landmark jet engine deal was revealed in June of last year during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the US. To produce fighter jet engines for the Indian Air Force, General Electric and Hindustan Aeronautics Limited signed a memorandum of understanding. Earlier in 2023, US General Electric announced that it had inked an agreement with Hindustan Aeronautics Limited to jointly manufacture engines in India to power fighter jets for the Indian Air Force. US President Joe Biden on Wednesday called for higher tariffs on Chinese steel and aluminium while addressing steel workers at the United Steel Workers headquarters in Pittsburgh. Biden said that China was cheating in its steel trade practices and that the US is investigating the Chinese government's practices tied to the trade of steel and aluminium. Biden pledged that the US Steel will remain a totally American company.
I promise you, and I'm not going to let that happen again. Look, right now, my U.S. trade representative is investigating trade practices by the Chinese government regarding steel and aluminum. If that investigation confirms these anti-competitive trade practices, then I'm calling on her to consider tripling the tariff rates for both steel imports and aluminum imports from China.
And in some more news from the U.S., jury selection continues in former U.S. President Donald Trump's hush money trial. 7 jurors have been chosen, but 11 more are needed. Trump faces 34 criminal charges related to falsifying business records and has pleaded not guilty to all of them. DD India's Sally Patterson has more from New York City.
Well, 7 of those jurors have now been selected. That's out of a total of 12 jurors needed for this criminal trial, plus 6 alternates. On Monday and Tuesday earlier this week, we saw streams of people, of New Yorkers, being brought into the court to be quizzed on their political persuasions, on how they sit on the political spectrum, what media sources they consume, what newspapers they read, what news channels they watch, what social media platforms they're on. anything to try and determine whether they would have biases against the former president or, of course, in favor of him. Now, one would-be juror posted on social media that Donald Trump should be locked up. The judge ruled that was unfairly against the former president, and that juror was dismissed. In fact, most of the jurors who've been brought in have been dismissed so far, either because they're seen as not being impartial in this case, or for very practical reasons as well. This case is expected to take 6 to 8 weeks, and some people said they simply couldn't take that much time away from their work. One medical doctor, for example, said that she couldn't risk that time away from her patients. Now, we've seen many people being quizzed by the prosecution, by the defense, to try and get to the bottom of where they sit on the political spectrum. Many of them do, of course, have opinions on the former president. He was the president of the United States and then has been in the spotlight over the past few years as well on the campaign trail for the upcoming presidential election. And he faces several different criminal cases across the United States. At the heart of this one in New York is a payment made to adult film star Stormy Daniels, $130,000 made ahead of the 2016 presidential election by Donald Trump's former fixer and lawyer, Michael Cohen. Now, Donald Trump is then alleged to have paid back that money to his former lawyer and filed that payment as legal expenses, something that the prosecution claims was incorrect and actually illegal. He's charged with 34 different counts of falsifying those records. He's pleaded not guilty to all of those counts and says that this is a political smear against him. He denies having any relationship with Stormy Daniels and maintains his innocence. Sally Patterson in New York, reporting for DD India.
Across the Atlantic, Croatia's ruling Croatian Democratic Union Party won Wednesday's parliamentary election, but with fewer seats than before and without a majority. According to preliminary results from 94.4% of polling stations, the HDZ party won 60 seats in the 151-seat parliament. A coalition led by the opposition Social Democratic Party was set to come in second with 42 seats, while the right-wing Homeland Movement was set to take third place with 14 seats. In news from the Indo-Pacific now, the Philippines has said that its decision to ramp up ties with Japan and the United States at a recent summit was the sovereign choice of the country. It was responding to China's comments opposing the trilateral meeting. The Filipino Foreign Ministry said that the trilateral grouping would promote peace and economic growth in the Indo-Pacific and should not be considered a threat. It said that China's excessive maritime claims and aggressive behavior, on the other hand, are undermining the peace and stability in the region. U.S. President Joe Biden hosted the Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Japan's Prime Minister Kishida Fumio in Washington, D.C. last week, where the three leaders jointly expressed their serious concerns over China's actions in the South China Sea. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson had said last week that it opposes forming exclusive circles in the region and any acts that stoke or drive up tensions. And now take a look at some more stories making news around the world. Sydney's Bondi Westfield shopping centre reopened for the first time on Thursday since a stabbing attack at the mall killed 6 people last week. Operators of the shopping centre allowed people to pay their respects to the victims. Stores at the mall remained closed though. Indonesia raised a high-level alert for volcanic activity in the country's Mount Ruang on Thursday. Officials also flagged the risk of a tsunami if parts of the mountain collapse into the ocean below. More than 800 people were evacuated on Wednesday. Authorities have widened the evacuation zone further. The United Arab Emirates was still grappling on Thursday with the aftermath of a record-breaking storm this week that brought much of the country to a standstill. In Dubai, operations at the airport resumed, receiving inbound flights at Terminal 1 used by foreign carriers, but flights continue to be delayed and disrupted. And still to come on DD India News Hour. India to go to the polls on Friday for the first of 7 phases of voting. Indian expats in London on what the world's biggest election means to them. And a special report on the Kohima War Cemetery, a memorial dedicated to the soldiers of the 2nd British Division of the Allied Forces who died in the Second World War.
As the cycle of accountability returns, the time has come when the biggest democracy chooses to write another chapter in its glorious history. Development, justice, regionalism, a big political canvas. Everything will be put to test in this mega battle for glory. DD India dissects what makes elections 2024 the battle royale in Indian politics. Data and analysis free from bias to help you understand why India matters. Great Indian Election on weekdays at 8:30 p.m. only on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. A quick recap of the headlines. India is all set for the world's largest election on Friday, polling to be held in 7 phases over 6 weeks. Israel's Prime Minister says that the country will defend itself as the West urges restraint. Jordan says that an Israeli response to attack by Iran would risk a wider regional war. And G7 finance ministers pledge cooperation on Iran sanctions. European Union to impose new sanctions on Tehran. All right, let's now get you the latest on the world's largest democratic election in India. India is set to vote in the world's largest general election, setting the stage for a mammoth exercise in democracy, with nearly 1 billion people eligible to head to the polls across just over 6 weeks. Polling for the first phase will take place on Friday, that is the 19th of April. Voting stations have been set up with training given to officials to ensure a seamless voting experience. Security personnel have also been stationed in all locations for foolproof safety. The 7th phase election concludes on the 1st of June, while the counting of votes is to take place on the 4th of June. Now, 2024 is the year of democracy. Now, during the past 75 years, the election process in India has evolved a lot. From ballot boxes to electronic voting machines, the Indian democracy keeps evolving. We take a closer look at how the electorate has changed over the years.
The first phase of polling will see 102 seats with 1,658 candidates in the fray. There are 969 million voters on the electoral rolls for the 2024 general elections across all phases. There has been a 6.25% increase in the number of voters since 2019, which stood at 912 million. How has the electorate changed over the years? Let's take a look at the demographics of the electors. Share of voters in total population is the highest in 2024. Voter population ratio varies across states. Lowest gender imbalance in the electorate. Higher share of first-time voters. The share of voters in the total population will be the highest in 2024. Elections over the years from 1951 to 2024 have shown that the electors as a percentage of the total population is rising from less than 50% in 1951 to 67% in 2024. The difference in the demographic profile of states shows a disparity in the voter population ratio. There are large variations. How has this changed over time? The numbers have increased, but in different magnitude. Undivided Andhra Pradesh showed a maximum increase of 16.5 percentage points, followed by West Bengal and Karnataka. Bihar has seen the lowest increase at 2.1 percentage points, followed by Punjab 3.9% and Rajasthan with 4.5 percentage points. The 2024 elections will see the least gender imbalance in the electorate. It was 910 in 1971. It went lower to 902 in 1991-92. In the 2019 elections, the gender imbalance was at 926, while in this election, it's at 948. Finally, the share of first-time voters is higher than what it was in 2019, but it is not the highest in India. There are 1.9% first-time voters in India, which when translated into numbers is 18.2 million first-time voters. The highest number of first-time voters was in 2014 at 2.75%. The percentage of first-time voters is the highest in Jharkhand at 3%, followed by Rajasthan with 2.9% and Madhya Pradesh with 2.8%. The lowest first-time voters are in Kerala and Maharashtra with 1%. This election could see many news. How the Indian voters adapt to changing times and challenges will be tested as India decides in 2024. Anil Thomas's report for DD India.
All preparations for the Lok Sabha election have been completed. Shishir Sheller now joins me from Nagpur. Shishir, elections in India, and also joining me from Haridwar is another of my colleagues, Siddharth Bharadwaj. Shishir, coming to you first, elections in India are a mammoth exercise indeed. Talk to us a bit more, if you will, about the preparations for a free and fair election in the state of Maharashtra in particular.
Well, absolutely, Ramesh. Just, I guess, less than 24 hours now remaining for the first phase of election in India. Nagpur is also one of the important constituency which will go for the first phase election. Where I'm talking about the Maharashtra particularly. There are 5 Lok Sabha parliamentary seats will go for the polls here in the eastern Vidarbha region. Now, these entire seats has a very different kind of geographical areas also. But at the same time, politically, even this 5 seats are equally important. Why I'm saying this because Union Road and Transport Minister Nitin Gadkari is also contesting from Nagpur constituency. We've also seen that Maharashtra's Environment Minister.
I'm afraid we've lost that link with Shishir Sheller in Nagpur. We'll try to reconnect with him if we can later on the broadcast. But going across to my another colleague, Siddharth Bharadwaj, who is standing by in Haridwar. Siddharth, if you can hear me, is Uttarakhand all set for the polling on Friday? What is the scene like in Haridwar?
Well, first of all, a very good afternoon to you, Ramesh. And the election fever, election fervor is as heating up as the weather here in Haridwar. And the state of Uttarakhand, which is all set to go to polls on April 19, is all set for the elections. You know, where I'm standing right now, it's Haridwar, one of the most important constituencies here in the state, where the 2 political parties have a major stronghold, that is the BJP and the Congress. Talking about the BJP, then Trivendra Singh Rawat is contesting from the party. And when talking about the Congress, then Virendra Rawat, who is Harith Rawat's son, former CM of Uttarakhand, is contesting from Congress. There are regular checks, security is also being strengthened in this region, particularly wherein the checks are being conducted, at a distance, especially for the vehicles who are coming from the other states. Police are checking those vehicles thoroughly to ensure that the elections, go in a very streamlined manner. When I was having a word with the residents here, Ramesh, they have some concerns, out of which the major one is the unemployment. They want more and more employment, especially for the citizens of Uttarakhand and this region. And the acknowledgement towards the current government's work is still there with the residents. They say that whatever the government has done, it's incredible, it's beautiful. But with these elections, they want something more. They say that earlier it used to take 2.5 hours to reach Dehradun from Haridwar, but now with these highways made, it just takes about 40 to 45 minutes to reach Dehradun, which is incredible in itself. So like I said, they are very happy about the current government's work, but they want more of it. And the upcoming elections will decide the future trajectory of Uttarakhand, especially this region. On uphills, Ramesh, if I talk to you about the concerns of the people,
sure,
then they want widening of the roads, they want better healthcare systems. These are some of the concerns which people have in the state, as the state is all set to go to polls on April 19, and people are very excited to go to polls because they have now become aware, courtesy social media, courtesy the campaigns by the ECI and the youth organizations, they now understand that what it means to actually exercise their right, because it's their right to vote. They are very excited. Additionally, with the chipping in of a youth and the first time voters is what making these elections more interesting, and this state is all set to vote, and people are very excited to cast their ballots. Ramesh.
Right, let me take our viewers from Haridwar in the north to Chennai down south, and joining me is my colleague Anbarasan Elango. Anbarasan, all eyes are on Tamil Nadu, where the BJP hopes to make inroads by taking on the ruling DMK. What's the mood like in the DMK and BJP camps? Also, what do the voters have to say this time round?
As you said, Tamil Nadu is going a different poll this year before 2014 and 2019. There is a different scenario entirely in Tamil Nadu. The triangular fight, the DMK alliance, ADMK and BJP. So all three alliances are in a difficult situation to get more seats on this time, because the DMK 3 years of ruling and the ADMK recently split with the BJP, break alliance with BJP and the NDA, who is emerging as an important player in Tamil Nadu. This election result will be kind of a show to the 2026 assembly election. So the BJP is very keen on to get more seats and particularly more vote percentage across all the 39 constituencies. In this election, around 6.23 crore people are eligible to vote tomorrow from 7 a.m. onwards. The Chief Election Commissioner of Tamil Nadu, Satyapradha Sagu, has conducted a practice today and explained that around 61,000 polling booths have been fully equipped, and the ramps for the CWTG voters and water. Due to the summer climate here, shades are already established. So all the people and voter awareness reach has been sent all these 15 to 20 days on more than that to reach 100% vote percentage this time. And also the election, around 3 lakh employees were deployed that, and the CAPF police personnel for the security region, and also 183 polling booths has been identified as a vulnerable polling stations. So all the preparations are done from 7 a.m. onwards from tomorrow. You can see the voting from Chennai and all across the constituencies.
All right, we leave it at that. Anbarasan Elango in Chennai. Thank you, appreciate it. Now, Udhampur, one of the 5 Lok Sabha constituencies in India's Jammu and Kashmir, is all set to go to the polls on Friday. DD India's Rama Tyagi caught up with the Deputy Commissioner of Udhampur and asked about the poll preparations.
We have with us DC Udhampur. Ma'am, what are the preparations for the final?
We have 654 polling stations in the Udhampur district, and out of which 11 are far-flung areas, so we had to dispatch them P-2 schedule, and rest of the 643 polling parties we are dispatching today, and all the arrangements with respect to assured minimum facilities at the polling stations, the training of the polling personnel, the security arrangements in all the areas, especially the critical areas with respect to the vulnerable areas, have been in place. Also, to encourage the voters, we have made special model polling booths. One of them will be manned by women. One of them would be manned by youth, one of them would be manned by PWD, and one of them is a green polling station where we'll be undertaking special plantation drives.
What is the target of polling percentage this time?
We had a polling voter turnout of around 74% in the last 2019 elections, and this time we are targeting 90% voter turnout.
So we've covered Uttarakhand in the north, Maharashtra in the central part of India, and Tamil Nadu down south. Let me now take you to the northeastern part of India, to Assam in particular. 5 seats in the upper Assam region are going to the polls on the 19th of April. On the last day of the campaigning, political parties use their full might to woo voters. Assam is going to witness a battle between the BJP and the Congress. And joining me from Dibrugarh, is my colleague Dibyendu Mondal. Dibyendu, a keen contest on the cards in Dibrugarh?
Well, of course, Ramesh, you know, this is a very crucial seat both for the BJP as well as for the Congress because, you know, the Union Minister Sarbananda Sonowal is contesting from the Dibrugarh constituency in Assam. He will be fighting against his own former party colleague, Lurunjyoti Gogoi of the AJP. He's contesting as part of the Assam Jatiya Parishad, which is part of the Indi alliance here in Assam. So, of course, this is a VIP seat is what is being considered this seat as. So, to be very interesting. Tea garden workers here also constitute a significant chunk of the vote shares here. Apart from the fact that the missing tribe is also one of the key constituents of the 5 assembly, the 5 parliamentary constituencies that are going to polls tomorrow. So, of course, preparations here are on full swing. Heavy security deployment of forces here on ground has taken place by the security officials as well as the electoral officers here. We have also witnessed checkings on across the different 5 parliamentary constituencies across the upper Assam region. So, of course, you know, preparations are, the stage is in fact set for, we had less than 24 hours from here on when the first phase of the largest democracy of the world goes to polls. Of course, you know, candidates will test their fate as to who they would vote and whose campaign perhaps or whose policy schemes they had liked over the last 5 years, and will seal the fate of the candidates that are contesting from this particular region in Assam. Back to you.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Dibyendu Mondal in Dibrugarh. Thank you for now. Appreciate it. Now, campaigning intensified for the second phase of elections to India's lower house scheduled for 26th of April, covering 89 parliamentary constituencies across 13 states. India's Home Minister Amit Shah held a roadshow on Thursday at Sanand in Gujarat's Gandhinagar parliamentary constituency. BJP workers gathered in large numbers along his route. The leader also held another roadshow at Kalol in Gandhinagar. Minister Shah is the BJP candidate from the Gandhinagar seat. He'll file his nomination papers on Friday. Voting for all 26 parliamentary seats in Gujarat will take place in a single phase on the 7th of May. Meanwhile, BJP's leader and Defence Minister Rajnath Singh addressed a public rally at Kottayam in Kerala. He said that the BJP is going to launch India's manned space mission in 5 years, but in the last 20 years, the opposition Congress party could not even launch its own young leader.
भाजपा 5 वर्षों में गगनयान की लॉन्चिंग करने जा रही है, सबकी लॉन्चिंग हो रही है, लेकिन कांग्रेस पार्टी के यंग लीडर की लॉन्चिंग पिछले 20 वर्षों में नहीं हो पाई है.
Now, in order to garner support in favor of candidates, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi is on a visit to Kerala, where he addressed a public gathering in Kannur. While addressing the gathering, Rahul Gandhi said that the Congress and the UDF accept the diversity of India.
Party and the UDF accept the diversity of India. We accept the multiple languages, the multiple traditions, the different histories, the different expressions of all our people.
Meanwhile, the Election Commission of India on Thursday issued a notification for the fourth phase of the election, which will take place on 13th of May in 102 constituencies across 9 states and 1 union territory. This phase will witness polling for 96 parliamentary seats across 9 states and 1 union territory, including Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Odisha, Telangana, Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal and Jammu and Kashmir. According to the poll body's notification, the last date for making nominations is 25th April. The scrutiny of nominations will take place on the 26th of April. Now, millions of potential voters are living overseas, but not all of them are able to travel back to India to make their voices heard. DD India's Julia Chapman has been speaking to Indian expats in London about what the election means to them.
There are 13 million Indian citizens living abroad, but to cast their ballots in the upcoming general elections, they have to make the long journey home. Dhananjay Thackeray is a master's student at the London School of Economics. He plans to travel back to India because he says every vote counts.
Elections in India is not only important for Indians, it is also important for the rest of the world also. So that's why this is the first thing. Secondly, people in India, they think that voting is only for those who have interest in the politics. But it's not like that. Like I have seen that. It's like we have day-to-day things which is dependent on the politics and political matters.
Thackeray is so passionate about voting, he's planning to help spread awareness about elections in rural communities of India. But not everyone is in a position to fly to India for the elections. While students may have the time to travel home to vote, expats in full-time work struggle to make that happen.
Unfortunately, like we do a job, right? And we have to handle clients. And the Indian holidays and the UK holidays, they do not match up, right? I do have a family here and I have a kid who goes to school. So because of these constraints, unfortunately, it's not possible to travel to India just for vote.
In India, postal voting is only an option for electoral workers and serving members of the army.
There are more than 350,000 Indian citizens living in the UK, according to the latest available data. Most of them are working or studying here. Even without their votes, the Indian elections will be the world's largest democratic exercise.
That's why some Indians abroad will go to great lengths to take part.
Wherever in the world I will be, but yes, I will do care about my country, and wherever I work, I will work for my country. So that's important for me to vote.
Flying to India also comes with a high price tag, but many registered voters say it's a price worth paying for democracy. Julia Chapman in London, reporting for DD India.
And now to all the news in the world of sport with my colleague Deepika. Deepika, over to you. What do you have for us today?
Thanks and good afternoon. We've got the biggest update for all the soccer fans because the Champions League is coming out to be a stunner of a game. So Antonio Rudiger scored the decisive penalty as Real Madrid beat holders Manchester City in an edge-of-your-seat 4-3 shootout victory to make it to the semi-finals of the Champions League after the teams were locked at 4-4 on aggregate following an extra time. City's Bernardo Silva and Mateo Kovacic both misfired in the shootout to put Madrid in the driving seat, and Rudiger slotted their final effort past the keeper Ederson to extinguish City's dreams of a second straight treble. An absorbing encounter had finished on 1-1 on the night after Kevin De Bruyne's second half effort had cancelled out Rodrigo's opener for Madrid, who sealed a semi-final berth against Bayern Munich. The teams had slugged out a thrilling 3-3 draw in the first leg in Madrid, who have hoisted the Champions League trophy a record 14 times. So Man City manager Pep Guardiola was gracious in defeat after their dreams of a historic second successive treble were dashed. On to tennis, Rafael Nadal's hopes of winning the Barcelona Open for a 13th time were dashed following a 7-5 and 6-1 second-round defeat by Australian fourth seed Alex de Minaur. The Spaniard was playing his first tournament since January and had made a winning return with his first-round victory over Flavio Cobolli, but the 37-year-old was no match for the informed de Minaur. In cricket and ahead of the upcoming T20 series of the USA Cricket has appointed former Australian international Stuart Law as their new head coach. 55 years old, Stuart Law will take the reins of the side for next month's 3-match T20I series at home against Bangladesh and when they co-host this year's ICC Men's T20 Cricket World Cup alongside the West Indies in the month of June. In zero tolerance towards breaching of rules, the NBA has handed over a lifetime ban to Jonte Porter after a league probe found he disclosed confidential information to sports bettors and bet on games. Porter, who was a two-way player for the Toronto Raptors, is the second person to be banned from the league by Commissioner Adam Silver for violating league rules. On to IPL, Punjab Kings will take on Mumbai Indians in the 33rd match of Indian Premier League in Mohali tonight. Both the teams are currently sitting at the bottom half of the points table and will be looking forward to improving their rankings. Punjab Kings have shown improvements in their bowling department in recent games, but their batting remains a major concern. Meanwhile, Mumbai Indians faced a setback despite Sharma's remarkable century in recent encounter against Chennai Super Kings. So that was a quick wrap from the world of sports. Back to you.
Thank you, Deepika. Appreciate it. And before we close, Kohima War Cemetery is a memorial dedicated to soldiers of the 2nd British Division of the Allied Forces who died in the Second World War at Kohima, the capital of the northeastern Indian state of Nagaland, in April 1944. Tapas Bhattacharya with the details.
Hey folks, right now I'm in Nagaland and in the capital of Kohima, and I have come to visit a war cemetery. This is a very famous war cemetery which is maintained by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, and this is where during the Second World War Battle of Kohima took place. It is also called one of the bloodiest battles of Second World War. In fact, it is being dubbed as the Battle of Stalingrad of this particular place. So this is the place where there's a particular line written, when you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today. This kind of sums up the way the people fought here, and a lot of people, Indian, Sikh soldiers, British soldiers, gave up their life to defend the country, to defend Nagaland. The Japanese army at that time besieged the whole area, Kohima, and at that time the British forces along with Indian forces were here, and Captain John Randall, he's been bestowed with the Victoria Cross because he gave up his life, and along with him there were many soldiers who were there and who gave up their life. That's the kind of story that's there. It's a story of valor, it's a story of bravery that you can find here in this war cemetery. With camera person Naveen, this is Tapas Bhattacharya, right from the war cemetery in Kohima.
And I have just about enough time to have share with you one more piece of news from the world of sport. With 100 days until the Paris Olympics, Brazil unveiled its official uniform with a runway show filled with former Olympians in Rio de Janeiro. Take a look. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of DD India News Hour. For those of you on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates on the DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. You can scan the QR code on the screen to download now. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram. You can also check out the website ddindia.co.in. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. From all of us here in New Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.
As a cycle of accountability